House Committee on Labor will come to order. Will the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Hodgson.
Here.
Representative Menzer.
Here.
Colazar.
Here.
Neal. Present. Andrews.
Here.
Churches.
Present.
Wagella.
Here.
Wozniak.
Here.
Mueller. Here. Kuntz.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes of the October 12, 2023 meeting? Representative Kuntz makes that motion. The minutes are adopted. First items today are the H1 for House Bill 4932 and House Bill 4962 from Representatives Skaggs and Scott. At this time, I would entertain a motion. Thank you. We got an amendment, excuse me. Thank you, sir. Representative Kuntz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have 3 amendments to this bill. I don't know if you'd like me to talk about each one individually or...
Why don't you talk about all of them together?
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. 5017 would put a cap on it. Right now, this Section C, we have an undefined meaning. It could be any dollar amount from $5 to $5 million. And it's problematic when we add civil litigation to the action as well. So I think what we need to do is define what this range should be. 5018 is very clear. Our goal here is to help the department enforce the law and ensure that businesses are in compliance. If that's the case, we should not be adding language that states you don't even have to report a problem, so the department might not know there's a problem, and then they seek civil litigation and the problem is not fixed. So 5018 just wants to solve the problem. I think we need to report it to the department before we seek civil action, or at least in conjunction with. 5011, in direct response to my question, the testifier last week gave me erroneous numbers. And what I wanted to do was to make the state law in compliance with the federal law, which would make the minimum penalty $68,000, which is higher than the sponsor has it. Bless you. And would provide a doubling of that fine for intentional or willful violations. So 5011 complies with federal law, and it was not what we heard last week. So those are my 3 amendments, sir. Can I ask for questions?
Please, discussion. Yes, Representative Churches.
I understand what you're doing for penalties. I think my concern with the threshold is if we have something egregious and then we want something more, and if entity decides like that's not that much money to them, that they're willing to make these, I don't know, these choices. If we have a court of law decide, then they can set the penalty as appropriate to the action. And I think capping it makes it so that it's not always fitting. So that's my only concern, but I understand where you're coming from on it as well.
Other discussion? Representative Wegler.
Almost Wagella, but it's okay. I have 8 different last names in that thing. I have a question. I know you mentioned raising the minimum, which I think is a good idea. But why reduce the maximum from $500,000 to $137,000?
So I had asked Representative Skaggs last week where he came up with the numbers. Where do these numbers come from? And his direct response was, this is federal law, and that is erroneous. My numbers are federal law. So I wanted state law to match federal law.
Do you not think it might be a good idea to have state law be stronger than federal law? That would be my question.
I think it's confusing. I think we need one standard and we should stay with it.
Other questions of Representative Kuntz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Representative Kuntz. At this time, we're going to take a roll call on Amendment 1 of Representative Kuntz. Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
On the motion to adopt the amendment, Chair Hadsma,
No.
Representatives Menser,
No.
Colazar,
No.
O'Neill,
No.
Andrews,
No.
Churches,
No.
Wagella,
No.
Wozniak.
Yes.
Mueller,
Yes.
Kuntz.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, you have 3 yeas, 7 nays, 0 passed. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk, please take a roll call on Representative Kuntz's second amendment.
On the motion to adopt the amendment, Chair Hadsma,
No.
Representatives Menser,
No.
Colazar,
No.
O'Neill,
No.
Andrews,
No.
Churches,
No.
Wagella,
No.
Wozniak,
Yes.
Mueller,
Yes.
Kuntz.
Yes?
Mr. Chair, you have 3 yeas, 7 nays, and 0 passed. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Clerk, please take roll on Representative Kuntz, Amendment 3.
On the motion to adopt the amendment, Chair Hadsma,
No.
Representatives Menser,
No.
Colazar,
No.
O'Neill,
No.
Andrews,
No.
Churches,
No.
Wagella,
No.
Wozniak,
Yes.
Mueller,
Yes.
Kuntz.
Yes?
Mr. Chair, you have 3 yeas, 7 nays, 0 passed. The amendment is not adopted.
Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to report out the H1 version of House Bill 4932. Vice Chair Menser moves to report with recommendation. Will the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Hadsma,
Yes.
Representatives Menser,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
O'Neill, Andrews,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Wagella,
Yes.
Wozniak,
Pass.
Mueller,
Pass.
Kuntz.
No.
Mr. Chair, you have 7 yeas, 1 nay, and 2 pass. HB 4932 is reported with recommendation, substitute H1.
Thank you. And Representative O'Neill moves to report out House Bill 4962 with recommendation. Will the clerk please take the roll?
On the motion to report, Chair Hadsma,
Yes.
Representatives Menser,
Yes.
Colazar,
Yes.
O'Neill,
Yes.
Andrews,
Yes.
Churches,
Yes.
Wagella,
Yes.
Wozniak,
Pass.
Mueller,
Pass.
Kuntz.
Point of order, this is 4932, 4962?
62.
62. No. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chair, you have 7 yeas, 1 nay, 2 pass. HB 4962 is reported with recommendation.
Thank you. Now we're going to take testimony on House Bill 5026, sponsored by Representative Martis. This would create a community and worker economic transition office here in Michigan. We'd like to invite Representative Martis and Senator Singh to present the bill. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, folks in the chairs, and Senator Singh for joining me for testimony this morning. As we embrace greener and cleaner energy, some folks have expressed concerns about what that means for the people working in the sectors of the economy today and if they will be included in the economy of tomorrow. Those concerns strike at the very core of my community, the reason I decided to run, and my top priority here in Lansing. I represent a community that has been consistently overlooked and undervalued. Because of decades of underinvestment, we have experienced folks moving away, families being broken up, and all of us being made worse off. I often say that when I'm at home at the grocery store, I run into the parents and the grandparents of those folks that I grew up with, but not those kids that I grew up with. When job loss is a possibility or even referenced, the potential causes of that community strike at the very core of my mission here in Lansing, and I take notice of that because I know what that's like. Fortunately, I believe that a choice between combating climate change and creating good-paying jobs is really a false choice. What motivates so many of us here is the blending of those two sacred goals that can never really be separated, respecting our planet and also respecting the people that call our planet home. Embracing clean energy and new advancements in technology can be done in such a way that does not leave workers behind. And this can be accomplished in part by the creation of an Office of Community and Economic Transition, modeled after similar legislation and efforts in states across the country. This office would help to bring together various programs administered by other departments, ensuring that our state government has a cohesive plan for ensuring that these programs are effective in meeting their targets and priorities. The office would foster a collaboration between both the private and public sector and between state and local governments. Whether it is a local business or a local government, all of us fail and are affected when our economy is not working for all those involved. Included in this legislation and critical to this office is the creation of an advisory committee to help develop plans for job creation and how workers and sectors of the economy that could be displaced can find new and better paying jobs. The Office of Economic Transition is an opportunity for economic growth. Yes, many of my colleagues are working on moving towards green energy at the state level, but the private sector is already miles ahead of what we're working on here in Lansing. Innovations in electric vehicles and the embracing of solar and wind energy are not occurring right now in Michigan because of government mandates. They are occurring because the people who are in business know what is good for business. The purpose of this office, working together with those folks already on the cutting edge of combating climate change and moving towards green energy, the purpose of this office is to ensure that whether we're talking about car manufacturing companies, like folks in Genesee County are often concerned about, or folks moving and working in natural gas or other current forms of energy, and as folks talk about wind and solar, no matter the transition economically, we need to make sure that no workers and no communities are left behind. Shifts and changes in our economy are nothing new, but I'm proud of what I think is a bipartisan consensus that we've built in recent years. We've seen, after the COVID-19 pandemic, various economies shut down. We've seen the problem of supply chain issues, and when we're not able to get those goods and services because they're halfway around the world, that's one of the key causes of inflation. We've gotten to a moment that I'm very proud of, not just in Michigan, but nationally, where we know we have to reinvest here in Michigan. And the efforts of this Office of Economic Transition would make sure that as we invest here in Michigan, that no workers or communities are left behind. We can do this in a way that combats climate change, we can do this in a way that creates good paying jobs, and we can do this in a way that values the dignity of work in communities like my own. And with that, I would like to pass the microphone to my friend and colleague, Senator Sam Singh, who's been taking a lead in the Senate on this very important legislation.
Thank you very much, Representative. Mr. Chairman, it's pleased to be here, pleased to call you Mr. Chairman, and it's good to see everybody here in the committee. Just want to give a couple additional highlights in regards to the bill. The office itself would be located in Leo. The reason for that is we want to ensure that we're taking a look at all the federal resources that come through the department and how we utilize them, especially for workforce development, whether it's training and other types of investments. Now, the good thing is, as we've watched some of the changes that have happened in the energy sector, we've seen all across the country companies get off from using coal. That is sort of a national movement. It's being done by industry. And so what's been really good here in Michigan, our largest utilities that use coal have been, because they knew that they were going to be closing these plants down 5-7 years, they had enough time to plan the transition for those workers. And, you know, we're pleased that that transition, by and large, was done without any type of layoffs. But what we want to ensure is that in any industry that is going through change, that we have the resources to help that industry think through whatever those potential changes are. Right now, this bill itself only focuses on two areas. One is the energy sector, the other one is the automobile sector. We know both of those industries are going through changes. Now, it's very possible that, especially in the energy sector, they would be able to manage those changes without this bill. But we thought, well, why don't we be proactive? Make sure that we have the resources, a department that's focused in on that, and that they can do two things. One is take a look at all the workforce dollars that are coming in through the state. Some of it's coming on the state level, but most of it's coming through the federal level. If we need to make changes or request waivers from the federal government, this office can do that to make sure that we're helping the workers make any type of transition. You probably all saw a great report that came out this summer that Michigan is the leader in the Midwest for clean energy jobs, and so we are seeing that transition already happen without an office like this. But imagine if we had the intensity and the resources there. I think that will be real helpful. The other thing is what it'll do is it'll also engage Treasury. Oftentimes communities have large investments, and those investments, as they transition, you'll see an impact on property tax values if a plant closes and things like that. We want to make sure that Treasury is also helping the communities. So this is not just for workers and their transitions, but it's also for communities and the transitions that they might go through. And so, as Rep. Martis said, this has been these offices that are now being created across the country. The language you have in front of us is heavily influenced by Colorado and Illinois that have created their own just transition offices. And the last piece is we also allow for the department in the future to take a look at other industries that might be going through changes. In the Senate committee, we had a discussion on AI and how AI is changing industries, and we don't know what that will mean for a lot of different industries, but perhaps at a point in time, you know, this department could take a look at those types of things, help industries make the plans that they need to make a transition. So anyways, I want to just say that that's the reason for the office, and it can help us, I think, make transitions in a variety of different sectors, but let's be proactive, working with our workers, but also with industry to make those changes together. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today on this important endeavor. Thanks to Rep. Martis and his team for helping us shepherd this idea and concept, and I know the two of us would be pleased to take any questions.
Thank you, Representative Martis and Senator Singh, for this important issue presently and the prescient look forward. Are there questions? Representative Coons.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Representative, Senator, thank you both for coming here today. Senator, per your testimony, we don't have a problem, and we're creating a solution for a problem that doesn't exist yet. And when we use governmental efficiency, it's the punchline to a joke. Everything we touch, we screw up. So now we're going to have another layer of bureaucracy to pick winners and losers. And it's going to be the result of, the jobs that you're talking about in the energy sector, in the automotive sector, are the result of policies that this current administration and previous are pushing. So the government has created a problem, and now we're going to have more bureaucracy to solve the problem that the government has created. This is a terrible circle. We're taking taxpayers' dollars from people that didn't make bad decisions, and we're going to apply it to winners and losers. I don't think Lansing should pick winners and losers. So my question, Mr. Chairman's been very patient with me today. Thank you, sir. We didn't have a transition budget when we went from horse and buggy to automobile. We don't have this transition budget. Why do we need this now? What's different this time, other than we're expanding government yet again?
So I do find, as we've discussed changes in the energy and combating climate change, that this would be an area that we would be able to find some sort of agreement on, because for Democrats, we want to vigorously combat climate change and create good paying jobs. I think a lot of our Republican counterparts operating in good faith have legitimate concerns about how folks could be displaced, how job loss could be a potential outcome. I think the two sides are obviously going to disagree on that, but I think the creation of an office like this should alleviate some of the legitimate concerns from Republicans and folks that are concerned about the transition to cleaner energy, which is to say that if the key concern about moving towards green energy is job loss, this office would help prevent that. And that would be my hope, that both sides would be able to come together on that. Number two, I would say that when it comes to some of these policies that you may critique, that you may not be a big fan of, it's equal parts efforts from the government and also what the private sector is already doing. When you look at that movement towards electric vehicles, I think we've done a good job in the past few years of making sure that that hasn't come at the expense of workers losing their jobs and livelihoods, but we need to be ready for every opportunity. I think when you look at the early 1990s and the embracement of free trade, I don't think people operating in good faith did that because they wanted to take away jobs from our friends and neighbors here in Michigan, but that was an outcome of those policies. So I think that this is, you said kind of looking to address a problem that may not already be there. We just want to be ready for that. And I would also say that your bow tie looks very nice. A bolo tie.
Bolo tie, appreciate it. First time I've ever worn one, thank you.
And I would just say just two very quick things. You know, back in 2008, 2009, as let's say the automotive industry was going through a lot of change, what we were able to do was bring in dollars to help companies themselves make the changes, sometimes to their systems, to moving to different industries, and we do that proactively to be able to help industry and business and the workers make that type of transition. And so it would be, I think, foolish of us not to think about things in a proactive way. Now, these bills facilitate and use the current systems that are in place, so they are required to use Michigan Works, and so you will not see a duplication of services. Again, as industry needs to make that change, businesses will be able to have resources, the workers themselves will be able to be retrained, and we're using all the existing systems. So what we're going to most likely do is have a couple staff people focused on this, but we're going to be able to then utilize the federal dollars and the state dollars that we're already putting into these systems in a more effective way.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair? But we have an unemployment agency, right? We have incredibly, historically low unemployment. This is a solution to a problem that doesn't exist. It's a layer of bureaucracy. It's an expense. It's spending taxpayer money for a problem that doesn't exist. And, that was a statement, not really a question, my question comes up, the advisory committee, it's not balanced in any way. There's not private sector on here. There's not big business, small business. You know, this is a governmental appointed advisory committee. This is not what businesses want. No one in business wants more bureaucracy, and that's exactly what you're proposing.
I think it is a problem that we're experiencing. I think we're actually coming up with a solution, though. I think you and a lot of the people here can remember 6 or 7 years ago when the New York Times and Wall Street Journal wrote all these op-eds saying, well, we see folks losing their jobs in the coal industry. Why don't we just turn them into coders, teach them how to code? I think that a lot of that was disrespectful. It was acting as if changing from one job to another would be as simple as writing an opinion piece. But there was a kernel of truth in there, which is to say, we see how the economy is changing. I'm from Genesee County. I can tell you very, very well that before folks associated Genesee County with the Flint water crisis, they associated it with Roger and me. I've seen that job loss. I've experienced that job loss. Not all of it pertains to specifically changes in the green economy or the energy sector, but if there's one thing that we should be able to guarantee, it's if we're able to get to a place where we have cleaner and effectively cheaper energy, that's fantastic, but it can't come at the expense of communities like mine.
But doesn't the unemployment agency already do that? This duplicates what we already have.
It doesn't,
And
sir.
that's my last question,
Yeah.
sir. Thank you for your patience.
Representative, it doesn't. What we're saying here is the unemployment agency deals with someone once they're unemployed. What we're trying to suggest here is a proactive approach. We work with business, we work with as the business knows that they're going to make transitions. So, for example, as you know, perhaps you are a supporter of big coal, and you know, I appreciate that if that is what you like to do. But as we're changing that industry, that's a market force that is changing coal, what we're going to do is retrain those workers. So this office would retrain them. I think what you're asking us to do is allow them to be all put into an unemployment situation and then do that. And what I would suggest that is the proactive nature of an office like this allows us to use workforce dollars to work with that business to then help their employees be ready for the next change. And that's what we've seen in the auto industry. I know you're familiar with MMTC and some of the work that we've done in a proactive way with the business community. I do think this is the same type of thing in utilizing those dollars, not making someone go into unemployment, thinking about this in a proactive way before that actually occurs.
Thank you. Representative Churches.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank you for thinking a little bit differently. I think since being in this space, I've noticed a lot of the legislation that we do is correcting past legislation that is no longer fitting to the needs of our people, or we're creating legislation in a reaction to something that is going wrong in our society. And I think it takes a lot of, I don't know, a certain amount of risk, but a lot of creativity to be able to try and anticipate the needs of a community and support those needs in an ongoing way, in a way to be flexible. And just kind of building off of what the representative was saying, I am also trying to learn and digest this information. And I just wondered if you could, in layman's terms, kind of explain it, like an example of the steps that an employee would have to go through, just so I could better understand how you see this working for our communities.
Yeah, so this is really meant for industry as a whole and not necessarily for the individual worker. What would happen is, as an industry is taking a look at a change, they would work with this office and say, we think the types of retraining that we might need to do with our employees is X. The office there would then take a look at, hey, we've got these workforce programs that are in existence. Do they meet that need? If they don't, are there things that we have to do to change some of those workforce programs to make that need? So this office would be that proactive thing, working with the industry to figure out what are the types of needs that are there. Now, with a community, let's say we know that a plant's going to close down. A coal plant is going to close down, obviously, in a couple of communities. DTE's already announced that. And you know that, and you're living that with those communities, right? But this will help then now direct Treasury to work with that community to figure out, okay, how do we help that transition happen, especially when they start, seeing that loss of revenue for the property taxes on something that we know is going to happen because the industry itself, DTE itself, has said they're going to close that coal plant. And so these are the types of things that will happen. So I don't think it's really meant for the individual, but the workers will see the benefit of it because this office will proactively work with the industry. They'll know what jobs are being potentially impacted, and that's how this will work.
Would benefit from the professional learning that is going on from the level of the industry that is going to be working with those individuals.
Absolutely, and there could be other programs that are created. Sometimes, we'll create perhaps earn and learn programs where, if you need to get training, oftentimes that's, you have to do that on your own time. But here, let's say if you have to still have your family and be able to provide, we'll pay you to go to that training. We've done that in the past. In 2008, 2009, when we were going through some of the economic transitions we were at that point in time. So there's a lot of different tools that are sort of envisioned in this department, but the department itself will have to create some of those as it goes online.
Okay, and then the second piece of that is, and I think this might be like my teacher lens, but since you are providing this supportive education experience, do you have an assessment tool that you plan to use, or any type of idea of how you could make sure that the intended outcomes that you want to happen are actually indeed happening, to kind of measure those metrics? Yeah,
so we're not obviously choosing any one specific intervention. That would be the department, and I would probably defer to the workforce development agency within LEO. They would probably be taking a look at what are the types of best practices in that industry, what are the tools. There's a lot of Department of Labor national tools that are available as well. So I don't know any one specific piece, but that will be part of the purview of the department.
Okay, so would you all be willing to set goals and intended outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. If there's additional things that we need to do, but I think also as the department develops this, I'm assuming that will be part of what they'll be required to do as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Representative Wagella.
Hi, thank you for coming here today. Repeatedly, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is the United Nations body for assessing climate change and climate science, has repeatedly warned that we are running out of time to act on climate change. The time, based on their timeline now, is 5 years, 276 days, 2 hours and 30 minutes. I bring this up because in order to avoid the 1.5% degree Celsius change, we really need to move fast. And I think that's really important to mention because there's no secret here in Lansing that we're working on climate legislation right now, and we're hoping to move to greener technology. And kind of referencing something that was said a little bit ago, if you study history, I was a history educator. Moving from the buggy to the automobile or industrialization, there were a lot of problems in that movement. We had child labor. We had people working in horrible conditions. We had, it took a Great Depression and the organizing of unions to really fix those problems. So I really just want to applaud the fact that you are looking proactively at this. And, government programs do work a lot of times when they're not constantly underfunded and undermined by policy. And I just want to ask, kind of coming full circle, can you talk a little bit more about how this will lead to a just transition when we move, to solving some of these crises around the globe?
Yeah, Representative, as a fellow fan of history, I think you articulated that very well, but I would say that it goes even further back than the Great Depression. I don't know if props are allowed, but I've got Alexander Hamilton on my socks. You can see it right there. And proud Hamiltonian. And I say that not just because I'm a fan of the musical, but because this concept of making sure that we pursue industrialization, but that no folks or communities are left behind, that is not original to the New Deal. That is not original to the progressive era. That is as old as our country's history. When you look at those policies of Hamilton in the 1790s, Henry Clay in the 1820s, a lot of the domestic policy of Abraham Lincoln in the 1860s, this concept that we know where the economy is going, but we need to make sure that it's done in a way that is of value and of justice. As a history person, I always like to look at that it didn't just start because of the 1930s or the early 1900s. This is a concept as old as time. And you're right, oftentimes in those transitions, whether it's from the buggy to the automobile or anything else, when we talk about it now in the history books, it can look relatively clean, but it was very, very messy. When folks talk about just transition, the just part is saying justice. It's saying that if we are going to combat climate change, which we should be able to agree upon as a necessity, that a core component of that is making sure that those communities don't get left behind. I think something that you and I both share is the understanding that oftentimes when it comes to climate change, the communities that are the most adverse affected are the communities that contributed least to the climate problem. That's not justice. And so when we're talking about changes in our economy, some things already being done by the private sector, but maybe aspects of that are stewarded by our state or federal government. It's making sure that those workers aren't left behind. I think at every stage of our country's history, there were unions and workers and organizers who understood that there could be problems as we make that transition. But I do feel that this time is different, that we have this consensus, we have this understanding, and we have a real sense of history that as we experience this next transition, whether it was going from a little bit more protectionism to a little bit more free trade, when it was going to the New Deal in the 1930s and 40s, whenever there's a change in the economy, I do find that this time is different, that we are ready to make sure that other folks aren't left behind.
Thank you. Representative Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions related to this. So as we're talking about worker transitions, it's, I think, easy for younger workers in the workforce to maybe pick up a new skill or make a transition. But as people get older in the workforce, say 50 or 60 years old, learning a new trade or making a transition gets increasingly harder. I'm curious if this contemplates what we do for that segment of the workforce that's maybe too young to take retirement, but maybe too old to make a full transition to a brand new career or field, and how we handle that segment of the workforce. And my second question is, oftentimes the jobs aren't in the same place as the old jobs were. And how does this contemplate displacement when there's a possibility that, as, say, the coal plant shuts down, there isn't a similar or related work to be had, and if workers have to move, if there has to be that displacement, how is that handled?
So I think these are very specific examples, and I think they're appropriate. In the end, I really think that's part of what the department would have to create, is taking a look at what are the workforce programs that are available, what are sort of the best practices for older workers as they're making a transition and so forth. And I think every situation is going to be probably tailor-made to that entity. And so I don't think today we can answer, what the program would be and so forth. You want to have the flexibility for a department and a workforce agency who typically has kind of, I wouldn't say cookie cutter programs, but usually on the local level those are kind of cookie cutter programs. But on the state level, you could work with that business and say, okay, you have 10 employees that are going to be in this senior, they don't want to move, they don't have the flexibility, let's figure out what they specifically need. And that's sort of the type of thing and interventions that will happen, at a department that is created there. So I can't speak to you specifically like what the curriculum would look like or how that would be, but that would be what I would expect from the area. Now, on the displacement side of things, there are, as you'll see in the bill, a whole set of things we ask the department to think about, like on how they would help somebody make a transition. And some of it is on training side, but some of it also could be financial pieces that could be developed with the business. And so, I think in some transitions where coal plants have changed, they've worked with the utility to find a place someplace else and see if there's enough time, especially if they know 5 years down the road we're going to have this change. Sometimes the family can make that decision, hey, we know we might need to move someplace else to be able to keep a job. So hopefully that some of those pieces will be able to work through that department.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question, any idea as to the estimated cost of this program?
So the House fiscal analysis was relatively broad. I would say that that's going to be something we're going to have to work on. I do feel that part of the plan is making sure that the various programs that exist in our state government and the various departments and so forth is really trying to bring together and streamline that process. So the House fiscal analysis didn't have a dollar amount yet, but some of these programs are already there. We just need to make sure that there's a lot more collaboration.
Yeah, there'll be some costs for the employees, the additional employees that would need to sort of be in this space. But like Rep. Marta said, a lot of the dollars and resources that are available are federal dollars that are already in the Department of Leo that would be utilized for the programming aspects.
Okay, and one follow-up with regard to the number of displaced workers because of the energy policies in the state. Do you have a number on that as to how many workers will lose their jobs and have to transition?
We don't, and because the good thing is in the past we've been proactive with, especially as coal jobs have been leaving, that they've been able to do a lot of the job transitions through attrition and or retraining and movement over there. So I don't think today there is an assessment of that. We want an office that will be proactive to ensure that we don't have significant job losses.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Menser.
Thank you, Chair. So the conversation today is mostly on energy and automotive sector jobs. And I'm looking here at the 12 members appointed by the office director, and I'm looking at the first line, 3 individuals who represent transition workers. I would like to know where our unions play a part in this, because our unions have been the leaders in training for these types of jobs. So if we're going to develop new programs and transition into more green energy and transition into electric vehicles, how are we going to let the UAW, LIUNA, AFL-CIO partner with us for training? Because they've been training people for decades with good skills, high-paying jobs. And you all know I'm a retired UAW member. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to know how we're partnering with our unions?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think you'll hear from a few folks after I'm done speaking on the specifics of this. I can say that I found out about this legislation because of my friends in the AFL and the laborers in particular. Over the summer, I was working on a few different pieces of legislation, reached out to both of those unions, and they brought up this policy that Senator Singh had been working on. So I found out about this opportunity because of our friends in labor, and am eternally grateful just for even the opportunity to work on this. And you're right, these are the folks that are on the front lines. They understand it well. Going back to a previous question, a lot of these workforce training programs aren't just already existing in our various state departments. A lot of our unions are already taking a lead on it. So part of what I see this office doing is bringing together, as we said before, whether it's state and local, whether it's public-private, there's a lot of excellent programs out there already, and we need a place to bring those together to make sure as many people as possible are benefiting from it. And organized labor is central to that. They do it better than anyone else. They know it better than anyone else. And I can just speak of the politics of the matter that this legislation was brought to my attention because of my friends in organized labor.
Thank you, Representative Martis. We have several witnesses on this, and then Senator Cherry is waiting patiently for presentation on his bill. So I'd ask members to try to keep your questions to one so we can get everyone through. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Representative Martis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Ryan Seabold from Michigan AFL-CIO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome.
As you said, I'm Ryan Seabold. I'm the Director of Government Affairs in Michigan AFL-CIO. We are Michigan's largest labor organization, representing 40 different labor organizations, unions, and constituency groups. I did want to say, and it will probably address some of the questions that were asked by the members of this committee, when similar legislation passed through the Senate Labor Committee, there were some very good changes that were made to that bill, and I would encourage this committee, when adopting, to make similar changes as made in the Senate committee. They were strong and positive, and I'll touch on those a little bit. But I want to say we applaud the legislature for introducing the Community and Worker Transition Act to target support for workers going through energy transition, in addition to other climate change and energy bills that will be coming before this body. Labor standards within clean energy bills can only go so far. These standards will not protect all impacted workers, which is why we need an office within the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity to ensure that these workers are not left behind. This office can track disaffected workers and communities, coordinate state and federal grant programs, and work to create the nuanced Michigan-specific policies recommendations that ensure Michigan's workers aren't left behind. It is crucial that any energy transition is a just transition. A just transition means supporting workers and communities as industries and jobs change. Michigan must ensure that clean energy economy fulfills a moral commitment to assist the workers and communities that have moved Michigan forward for generations, as well as the disproportionately impacted communities who have borne the cost of these industries for decades, and to thereby support a just and inclusive transition. There are several industries that will be impacted by energy transition, including auto workers, who will be shifted away from producing combustion engine vehicles to electric and hybrid vehicles. Oil and gas and coal transportation, generation and maintenance and refinement, and skilled trade workers. A fair and equitable transition must keep workers and communities whole, revitalize and diversify local economies, and address racial inequities while ensuring the retention and creation of and accessible pathways into good-paying union jobs. Just transition policies help to protect good-paying union jobs, ensure strong labor standards, and invest in the workforce. There are many issues that can arise with energy transition. Communities that rely on fossil fuel generation facilities will lose important tax property base. This affects the utilities, roads, school, police, and fire, and local public resources that rely on property tax. Workers who transition into new jobs often have to move further, disrupting local governments, and face job changes that lead to lower wages. One thing that I wanted to point out why this is so important is California went back UC Berkeley went back and looked at some of their energy transition changes and found that 74% of workers were able to find new employment after they were laid off due to energy transition. However, the average received a 24% pay decrease in their new positions. That's why it's important to be proactive and work with workers on the front end rather than reactive afterwards. The most important thing that this office can do is ensure that new jobs that are created are good paying union jobs that with comparable wages, benefits, and quality of life. If the state does, it does this state and working families no good to eliminate good paying jobs and replace them with poverty level jobs that people cannot raise their families on. It is important that the Office of Community Worker and Transition be able to engage in the following activities: local property tax replacement programs, wage differential payments and enhanced unemployment benefits, programs to supplement health insurance and retirement for impacted workers, and retraining and pre-apprenticeship programs for impacted workers and communities. A key focus of economic development incentives for new energy fuel facilities should be to ensure and incentivize that they are located in communities that have been impacted. Reinvestment needs to be comparable from jobs and an economic impact standpoint. We don't want to see subsidies that simply transition legacy union workers getting hired into low-wage jobs that they could get without a just transition office on their own. We believe this legislation is a proactive approach to addressing the issues facing the livelihood of working people and their families as our climate and energy needs are addressed. Two important changes that the Senate made that I did want to point out based on questions. Representative Churches, we did include a requirement that this new office track the outcomes for the workers and communities so that they can make sure that the efforts are having the impact that we want to see. And in terms of the advisory committee, that was made to be an optional committee if the department feels it is necessary, but labor organizations were included in those who could be part of that committee as well.
Thank you, Mr. Siebold. Questions? Thank you. Now we're here from Jean Duchemin, who is Vice President of UAW Local 1753. Good morning.
Push the red button. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Gene Duchman, Vice President of 1753, like you said. And I'm just going to read this real quick. So nearly 170,000 Michigan workers are employed in the auto vehicle and parts manufacturing. In 2022, Michigan built over 1.8 million vehicles, far more than any other state. Nearly 1 in 5 American-made vehicles were built in Michigan. And Michigan is a leading producer of engines and transmissions that power these vehicles. Auto manufacturing has one of the highest job multipliers of the industry. Every job in auto manufacturing supports around 7 additional jobs in hold on one second, guys. In the economy. Across Michigan, quality auto jobs are crucial to sustaining families, communities, local economics, and tax base. The auto industry is facing the most significant changes it has seen in most of our lifetimes. Michigan workers support the shift to a cleaner auto industry. It is crucial to addressing climate change and maintaining a competitive domestic auto industry. Michigan auto workers reject the false choice between cleaner vehicles and quality jobs. UAW members are already building the vehicles of the future right here in Michigan, including the F-150 Lightning BEV in Dearborn, the Hummer SUV and pickup BEV in Detroit Hamtramck, and the Chevy Bolt in Orrin, electric motors in Sterling Heights, and the Jeep Grand Cherokee plug-in hybrid in Detroit. And more EV production is coming. Michigan auto workers and pro-workers, policymakers continue to fight to secure investments in future technology right here in Michigan. However, the shift to EVs present a challenge to the employment of workers currently making ICE vehicles, engines, transmissions, exhaust systems, and fuel systems. Tens of thousands of UAW members have high-quality union jobs producing such components. The widespread economic disruption in the auto manufacturing that will come with the shift of EV requires that the state adopt policies that, 1, hold auto workers harmless in transition, 2, provide auto workers access to training, employment, and career paths, 3, reinvest in the workers and the communities, And 4, replace lost jobs with quality manufacturing jobs. We know the impact that a closed auto plant can have on families and communities. We need to get ahead of the curve and ensure that EV transition does not have similar impacts on Michigan communities. For the EV/clean energy transition to be a just transition, it is not simply about attracting new investments. It also requires that workers and communities have a voice. When it comes to auto jobs, a just transition means EV jobs must be as good or better than the existing ICE auto jobs. Without sufficient safeguards, we fear EV transition policies will facilitate a race to the bottom, allowing manufacturers to pit EV jobs against ICE jobs and ensuring the standards of Michigan auto workers fought for are absent for the next generation of vehicles and those who build them. Manufacturing jobs are not inherently good jobs. For much of the last century, Michigan auto workers have fought to make auto manufacturing jobs quality jobs that build the middle class and sustain Michigan communities. When it comes to EV jobs, we are seeing troubling signs when it comes to job quality. In battery cell productions, for example, a White House study found that the battery cell plants pay, quote, much less, unquote, than the existing powertrain plants they are replacing. And the UAW has released a study which found significant and unique health and safety issues for workers in battery plants. We are seeing automakers use joint ventures with avoid collective bargaining and undermine job quality in the industry. In the auto industry, job quality for production workers has already been under attack since 2003. Auto worker wages, adjusted for inflation, has declined 30%. A just transition would use the EV transition to reverse these trends and build back the industry. Now, when we talk about the battery plants, that will replace a whole bunch of jobs, right? Because our cars are combustible. In our negotiations as we're going, because my plant's out here on strike right now, as we're having these discussions, we have in paper a signed deal with their battery plants. But we also understand the true fact when it comes to all union jobs, and I know a lot of our members up here have the same understanding. We can negotiate anything under the sun, but that could all be taken away with a stroke of a pen when it comes to the ballot boxes. So we have a clear understanding of the importance of all of this. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Dushman. Are there questions of Mr. Dushman? Thank you. Jason Peak from UAW 602, please.
Yes. Good morning. I'm Jason Peak. I'm from UAW Local 602 here in Lansing. I came before you to speak on this legislation. I want to thank the members of the House that support the UAW workers that are on strike and have supported us in the past. I'm thankful for this legislation because as we were discussing, and many discussing, we are transitioning to new technology, and it's important that we are proactive in taking care of the workers who will be manufacturing the new technology. As my brother from 1753 spoke on, there's over 150,000 auto workers here in the state, and we support 7 other jobs in the community and the economy. So that's over 1 million families that can be affected by what we do. And I know the gentleman over here, he spoke about, the unemployment office can take care of those things, but as a father and a provider for my family, if I lose my job to an unfair transition to EVs, the unemployment line's too late for me and my family. The trauma from losing work and not knowing how you're going to take care of your family can be devastating and can last a generation. So I appreciate that we do have offices and programs that can help workers who've lost their work, but I think a proactive and thoughtful protection of these workers is a much better approach than we'll take care of them on the other end. And I wanted to point that out. But yes, we want to have a just transition for those workers, and this legislation should accomplish some of that by having a committee that will work to have solutions for those workers. Let's see. And I also appreciate that we're talking more than just the auto workers here in this, that we're also talking about some of the disproportionately impacted communities, because, as we fight for just our jobs, we also are thoughtful of our communities and things, because if we earn another week's vacation, but climate change has destroyed our lakes and destroyed our rivers, it doesn't really do me much good to take my kids to, dried up rivers or polluted lakes and things. So I think it's important that we're also talking about other communities too. So, excuse me. Yeah, but also, the gentleman here was talking about winners and losers and how this would pick winners and losers. I want to say that the winners would be Michigan workers. Michigan families would be the winners of this by keeping us from the economic loss of losing these jobs and ending up in an unemployment line, or having to move to another state, or having the jobs disappear altogether to offshore. So the losers, can be other countries. We want to keep our Michigan families together. We want to keep our Michigan workers working, and we want to keep our tax bases up. So, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peak. Representative Kuntz.
Mr. Peak, really quickly, we don't know how much this program's going to cost.
Yeah.
The losers will be the taxpayers, right? We keep talking about government money. The senator did a really nice job with euphemism, federal money. It's taxpayer money.
Correct.
The winners are the people who get the money. The losers are the people that pay the money. So there are absolutely, this legislation is going to say, I'm going to take from you and I'm going to give to you. And they're trying to solve a problem that we've created. And I'm going to ask, my question is, do you know how many people that consumers and DTE have laid off in their transition away from coal?
I personally do not.
Zero.
When you talk about giving from one, taking from one, giving to the other, we're all in this together. Okay, my work affects my family and those in my community, and so we're all taxpayers. I pay taxes, you pay taxes, and we all benefit when everyone's working. Okay, low unemployment, high paid jobs, and jobs with skills is good for everyone. So,
Thank you, Mr. Peak, for your very thoughtful and responsive testimony and for your rejoinder. Robert George from Michigan Laborers District Council.
Good morning, Chairman Hasma and members of the House Labor Committee. My name is Robert George, and I serve as the Director of Government Affairs for the Michigan Laborers District Council. The Michigan Laborers District Council represents nearly 15,000 members across all 83 of Michigan's counties. We are a construction building trades union where our members work on many of the key infrastructure projects across our great state, as well as in all segments of Michigan's energy sector. In my capacity with the laborers, I've had the opportunity to interact with many of our members who work in all different segments of Michigan's energy economy. I come before the committee today to speak in support of House Bill 5026, sponsored by Representative Jasper Martis. House Bill 5026, titled the Community and Worker Economic Transition Act, is an incredibly important bill that would tackle a major issue facing Michigan's energy workforce. While this legislation is not yet a finished product, with many items still to be added or amended, it is an important first step in ensuring the long-term prosperity of Michiganders working in the energy sector. The major free trade expansions that occurred in the 1990s and early 2000s, including the implementation of the North American Free Trade Agreement and the expansion and membership of the World Trade Organization, lacked meaningful protections in this country for workers involved in the manufacturing sector and were notably deficient in providing resources to workers who lost their jobs as a result of plant relocations outside of the United States. Consequently, Michigan, a locus of manufacturing, suffered nearly 170,000 job losses in the manufacturing sector during that time, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Hundreds of thousands of jobs that depended on those manufacturing jobs were also lost across all sectors of Michigan's economy. As a state, we cannot allow a repeat of what occurred under expansionist trade policy to happen in our energy sector. This is where House Bill 5026 comes into play. By creating the Community and Worker Economic Transition Office, we can ensure that Michigan's energy workforce emerges stronger and more prosperous as this energy transition unfolds. Core items that need to be included in this office for it to be successful include mechanisms to ensure workers who are displaced are compensated for lost wages and benefits, a revenue replacement system for communities who see plant closures, robust labor protections on state credits and tax incentives on new development, funding for training and reskilling for workers who are displaced, robust data collection and collaboration across all state departments, and concerted outreach to stakeholders in impacted communities. As mentioned earlier, the Illinois Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, also known as CEJA, which established the Displaced Energy Worker Bill of Rights, is a model to look at. If these items can be included in this legislation, the Office of Community and Worker Economic Transition would be a national leader in ensuring residents are protected in a time of uncertainty. In a time of great change in how our state's energy is generated and transmitted, this legislature has the opportunity to ensure that no Michigander gets left behind and that Michigan can truly achieve a just transition. I want to commend Representative Jasper Martis as well as Senator Sam Singh for sponsoring this legislation and thank Chairman Hadsman and the respected members of this committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak before you today. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. George. Any questions of Mr. George? Representative Wozniak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had two questions for some other testifiers earlier. Same two questions. Do you have any idea how much this program is going to cost?
I do not.
Do you have any idea how the policies of this administration in this state is going to affect the number of jobs that are lost?
I think that's a rather comprehensive question that I would be happy to have with the representative when I have the opportunity to present more information.
Thank you.
Representative Wagella.
Thanks for your testimony. I feel like I had to jump in here because a lot of talk about the cost. We're creating a department in LEO. Our body is the body that funds LEO through the budgetary process. So we will determine, I think, that amount at that stage. But LEO will have to work within the budget that we approve for them, which I think is important. And just, I think some reporting that's come out about like the transition from gas plants or combustion engine plants to EVs, they'll require 30 to 40% less of the workforce. And I just want to thank you for testifying. I don't know if you want to expand at all about how how important a just transition is, but I just wanted to clear up some things because the number can't be that big. I mean, and there's no secret in Lansing that I have not been a fan of how we spent some money, but this is not the same thing. This is looking at how to protect workers who are losing their jobs for a transition that has to happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Representative. And we in the building trade sector that have a lot of members in the energy sector are facing some of those same challenges as the private sector is largely leading this transition, that we see some job transfers, and we generally have less work in certain segments of the renewable sector than have in traditional energy production in the state. So ensuring that we have these protections and these assistances for our members and the workers in the building trades will be very impactful.
Thank you, Mr. George. Not wishing to speak, but supporting 5026 is Don Kettinger from the Michigan Nurses Association. Not wishing to speak, but supportive of House Bill 5026 is Stephanie Johnson, the Utility Workers Union of America. Not wishing to speak and opposing 5026 is Amanda Fisher of NFIB. Not wishing to speak and supporting the bill is Mike Spence from SEMCOG. Not wishing to speak and opposing the bill is Steve DeLee of the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. And not wishing to speak but supporting the bill is Amy Molmer of the Metropolitan Affairs Coalition. We're now here testimony concerning another bill before us. This is Senate Bill 169. I'd like to invite Senator Cherry forward to explain his bill, and joining him, I believe, is Jonathan Lucky from the Michigan Corrections Organization. I apologize. I think you're also with SEIU, correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hosma and members of the committee for hearing these bills. Senate Bill 169 requires public employers to communicate employee contact information when they're employed into a union bargaining unit to the union's bargaining representative, and requires the employer to inform the incoming employees that they have been hired into a union bargaining unit within 30 days of the employee being hired. These new requirements are being made to ensure that new employees are given the proper notice and understanding of their union rights and representation, and for the union to be able to provide representation and services. When this issue came up a number of years ago during my first term in the House, what became aware is that particularly state employee unions were not getting that information and being made aware of the new folks that they represented. Now that has since changed under the new administration, and that information is now communicated to their bargaining representatives. So this bill would codify the current practice that is now in place that was not in place prior. And really, it's important that all employees are able to access their rights of representation by their union, and that the union be able to communicate with those that they represent. And I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lucky.
Mr. Lucky, thank you for your testimony. I think I misstated your first name. It's not Jonathan, it's Jonovan. Am I correct?
Yes,
thank you.
It's Jonovan Lucky, and I
Please go
appreciate
ahead.
it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee, it's a pleasure to be able to speak. My name is Jonovan Lucky. I'm the Executive Director at SEIU Local 517M. So we represent roughly approximately 7,000 state, local government, and also school workers who work in a variety of different departments. Through the state, we work not exclusively or limited to, but for employees that work for MDARD, UIA, DHHS, MSP, Eagle, Leo, and almost every department that's there. We represent workers in Battle Creek for the municipalities of Battle Creek and Saginaw, school aides and parapros, bus drivers in communities such as Otsego and Flint. And so we have a wide array of employees. I think I'm happy and very pleased that Senator Cherry introduced this legislation, that the Senate moved on it, because it's important. As Senator Cherry stated, up until a few years ago, we weren't able at the state side especially to get this information. We right now have a practice that's there, but it's not codified in the law. So that if there is a regime change, that could be changed at any moment. I think codifying the law is important because as an organization, we have a legal obligation to represent members and employees that we're the exclusive bargaining representative of, whether they pay dues or not. And so for our dues paying members, obviously we have that information. It's pretty accessible, but a number of the folks that reach out to us are non-members, and it's not proactive for us, and it's reactionary because not every contract we have has language where we can get that information from employers. So we have some that give it to us, some that aren't, and other people that are deficient. And when problems arise, we're now on the back, we're on the defense. And a lot of times when we're getting calls from these members, they have there's timing issues with the grievances or issues they have that need to be taken care of and attended to. And in most cases, we're not the only bargaining representative within these departments or within these municipalities. To make matters even more confusing, we've had employers confuse that because there's some places where we're not the only SEIU local that represents employees there. And so we've had matters where we're getting contacted, but they're contacting the wrong local, and all those things tend to hinder and limit folks being able to have access to the rights that they deserve. And so for us, it's a simple matter of we want to make sure that we're preserving the rights of the folks that we are the exclusive bargaining representatives of, and whether they're dues payers and whether they're not. And we think it's important that this legislation be codified in there so that we can make sure that those rights of these individuals are preserved. So.
Thank you, Mr. Lucky, and Senate Labor Committee Chair Cherry. Are there questions of either Senator Cherry or of Mr. Lucky? Representative Coons.
Mr. Lucky and Senator, if you don't mind, on the record, would you give me your home address, your personal cell number, your wage, your employee ID number? I'm going to need all this information, even though you're subject to the Janus ruling. All of the employees that you represent are subject to the Janus ruling and don't have to do this. You're asking them to provide this private information. in the incredible claim that you're saying they may not know they work at a union shop, that's what you'd like this committee to believe? They don't know? So I get hired somewhere. Hey, you're the new guy. You didn't know it was a union shop? I mean, that you can't possibly expect us to believe that. I'll wait for the information. Go ahead with your information first, please.
Okay. My name is John Cherry.
Mm-hmm.
I live at 1025 Kensington Avenue in Flint, Michigan, and my phone number is 810-444-8598. Now that we've got that passed,
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
do you have a question beyond my personal information?
Well, I think it's important that we get that out on the record, but are you asking us to believe that people will get hired in a job and they don't know they're represented by a union?
Do you want to talk about how it works?
So, one, I don't want that to be a misrepresentation of what I said. What I said was that at a lot of times we're not the only union that's there. And I can tell you for a fact in the last few months, I've had a number of people that have called my office, called one of my labor reps, thinking that maybe we were there because there might be job classification either overlaps or in a lot of cases, we might have 1 or 2 employees that work at a shop, and then the rest of the folks are union, but they're not our union. So I get calls from folks that are ASSE members, that are SEIU Local 1 members, but not SEIU 517M. So what I said is, when we're doing that, when I'm checking my database to see whether or not we represent them, if I don't have that information, if I don't know who I'm legally obligated to represent, it can be detrimental to them in preserving their rights. So I'm not saying they don't know that they have a union shop, but it's not always clear which unions it's there. And if I don't know that they've been hired, because I'm not the one doing the hiring, I'm not the employer, I'm not dealing with that, I won't have that information. I say that's detrimental.
Any concerns about privacy here?
So, oh, go.
Yeah, thank you, Representative. The information that's being communicated is information that's in a telephone book, right? Your phone number, your name, your address.
Would you like a telephone book so we don't have to do this?
Yeah. So, this is basic contact information for somebody to get in contact with the people that they represent.
Thank you. Are there other questions of Senator Cherry or of Mr. Lucky? Thank you, gentlemen. Representative Wagella.
First off, thank you for this legislation. I come from the education space. I was a union president in the education space. And if you know anything about education, we have a very, very high turnover rate. And there were times in districts that I've been in and that I've seen people be in where the district intentionally tries to make it like impossible to interact with these new hires. And I think that what this does is it does provide workers with access to their union, but it also does provide the union access to workers, which is a good thing. I mean, I've worked in many districts, and I will tell you, the districts with stronger unions and collective bargaining in the states that have stronger collective bargaining laws are better districts, right? The teachers stick around, the pay is higher, et cetera. And I think that's important. And you know, I'll go so far as to say that, you know, Janus, the decision was an overreach and an intentional decision designed to hurt collective bargaining. So I think we should, as a state that recognizes the rights of workers, find ways to ensure that people have the right to collective bargaining. But can you talk about how legislation like this might lead to better representation in the bargaining unit? Because, you know, you have more workers that have access, direct conversation with the union.
No, I think that first point is very important. I think having that access, knowing who the workers are that are there, that allows us to, preemptively be able to talk to them, let them know what their rights are. It's up to them to make a choice on whether or not they want to pay dues. That's not what this is about. It's about making sure they have access to the information and the right contracts. Even with us, I might represent 3 different units at the same employer. They might have 3 different contracts. We have 90 contracts we administer, like, because we've taken on other employees where they've been. So there's a lot of times where this information or not having access to it can lead to confusion because maybe they're given the wrong contract. We can rectify that if we're reaching out, letting them know, here's what it is. This is what you were given the wrong thing. I can't tell you the number of times just that simple mistake happens. So when they're doing that, when they're made aware of the rights they have or what's preserved, it helps us out. The other thing that happens is, and these mistakes happen not just on like an employee's end, but on payroll. We've had plenty of times where folks have been put on the wrong wage scale. Because there were multiple contracts, even with the same union. When we have that information, we're able to rectify that, which helps out because it's not just beneficial to the employee who may be getting paid the wrong wage and be owed money, but if that persists for a while, or if it's a number of employees, it has a negative impact on the employer where now they're paying those wages back. And that can actually have a negative impact on their operational needs. So I think it's important to have that access so folks understand their rights, but I also think legislation like this is mutually beneficial. So.
Can I also, if I can, one quick follow-up?
It's going to have to be quick.
It'll be very, very quick. So, and working being in the union space, is there any time or place where the union would ever just publicly dox members of the bargaining unit?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, so I want to add to that. I mean, we do have the Michigan Identity Theft Protection Act, which applies to all organizations. So there are penalties for engaging in that type of behavior.
Senator Cherry, Mr. Lucky, thank you for your patience. And Mr. Lucky, thank you for letting us know how it works when the rubber meets the road, when you're on the ground. Appreciate that. Next, Stephen Rizeppa from AFSCME Council 25, and I believe too, Mayor of Trenton, am I correct? Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today and allowing me the opportunity to testify. I'm Steve Rizeppa, Political and Legislative Director for AFSCME Council 25, here to testify in support of Senate Bill 169 on behalf of AFSCME. As we heard in previous testimony from Senator Cherry and Jonovan, the bill is relatively simple. It would require the public employers provide the names and contact information of public employees to the folks who are legally obligated to represent them in union shops as exclusive bargaining representatives. As many of you know here, even after the repeal of right to work in Michigan, public employees still work in a right to work environment nationally, and anyone who wants to become a dues-paying member of the union must affirmatively opt in to do so. We are still legally obligated to provide representation to those who do not affirmatively opt in, and to effectively do so, frankly, we need to know who those individuals are. While local union leaders generally make their best effort to make contact with their fellow employees at work early on in their employment to discuss union matters, not all work sites are created equal in this regard, or do they operate in the same fashion. What may be possible to hash out and address in a 10-man DPW department is likely not as complex as a 2,000-member university hospital system with dozens of different work sites and a 24/7 operation with even more job classifications and day-to-day chaos that comes with doing the actual job. It's imperative for workers in union facilities to have the opportunity to effectively communicate with one another to ensure that the contract they have fought for is being followed properly, whether they pay dues or not. Denying or withholding information about who is working in these facilities or shops hurts both dues payers and non-dues payers alike and makes contract enforcement increasingly difficult. Public sector labor unions must show value to our membership every single day, and we work tirelessly on their behalf to do so. We cannot show value to individuals or do everything in our power to fight for the hard-earned benefits that they deserve and have fought for when we may not know that they exist. Anti-worker managers can currently withhold this vital contact information from bargaining representatives to create a self-fulfilling prophecy about how ineffective these representatives may be and further drive a wedge amongst their employees. Senate Bill 169 would help remedy this issue and simply implement transparency and a level playing field to ensure we can provide the highest possible level of representation to public sector workers that we can. AFSCME Council 25 strongly urges a yes vote on this bill. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any questions? Representative Kuntz.
Really quickly, Mr. Rizeppa, am I saying that correct?
Correct, yep.
I married a Jablonski, so I try really hard to get that right.
The consonant next to the Z gets everyone.
Correct, it does, yes. From Hamtramck.
Yep.
Thank you for your patience. I want to be very clear, for the record, I made the amendment that if you are not a dues-paying member, you do not have to be represented by the union. I made that amendment in this committee, and it was voted down 7-3, and I'll let you figure out who voted no on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any real questions? Thank you, Mr. Rizzepa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Next, we have Jennifer Smith from the Michigan Association of School Boards, who opposes the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for allowing me to testify. I am Jennifer Smith, Director of Government Relations for the Michigan Association of School Boards, and we do oppose the bill in its current form. We understand the purpose behind this and needing that information to properly represent employees. However, we feel that this goes farther than we should be doing with our employees. It puts schools in a tough situation when, under the Supreme Court ruling, our employees do not have to be part of a union, but we will be sharing all of this personal information with the union without their consent. So our suggestion and our request is that this information is important for unions to have, yes, but it should be done at the consent of the employee. So our suggestion is that there be some sort of sign-off by the employee. This would allow the employee to share the appropriate information, make sure that the union has the correct address, the best way to contact them, email or phone number. They would have control over that to make sure that they're contacted easily. And it would save our public employers, our school districts, from starting off on a rough foot with an employee that may not want to be part of the union. So while we understand that this information is important, we do think that there should be some sort of employee sign off on this. And as you heard that this would codify things that the state is doing, that is different than what districts do. Districts already do have a reporting mechanism to MDE as far as who their new hires are. It is different than what is laid out in this bill. So while it's codifying what's happening at the state unions, it is not the same as what's happening at the schools. And so this would also put an additional burden on our business officials. They would have to put all of this stuff together in order to submit it every 30 days to the union. But as I stated, we do understand the purpose of this bill, and we would be happy to support it if we could work out some way to have employee consent be part of sending that information. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Not wishing to speak, but in support of the bill, Matt Soash from the Police Officers Association of Michigan. Not wishing to speak, but opposed to the bill is Matt Schuler from the Michigan Association for Superintendents and Administrators. Not wishing to speak and opposing the bill is Peter Spatafor from the Michigan Alliance for Student Opportunity. Not wishing to speak and supporting the bill is Don Kettinger from the Michigan Nurses Association. Not wishing to speak and supporting the bill is Ryan Seabolt from the Michigan AFL-CIO. Not wishing to speak and supporting the bill is Beth Kelly Bird from SEIU Michigan. Not wishing to speak and supporting the bill is Dr. David Michelson from the Michigan Education Association. Not wishing to speak and opposed to the bill is Steve DeLee from the Mackinac Center for Public Policy. We do have a card in relation to 4932 and 4962 that we voted on earlier. I did not read this card. Alan D. Lee from ROC Michigan supports both bills. There be no further matters before the Labor Committee. We stand adjourned.